Hi, loves. Today we're going to be discussing two of the most controversial Hollywood talk show hosts ever, Ellen DeGeneres and James Corden. Just so you know, the video is broken into two parts. They're not discussed like mixed together. The first part will be about Ellen, and then the second part about James Corden. These videos are so long, you'll never have to hear your own thoughts again. Down in the description box, I will leave links to my main channel, Coffee and Cults, my other channel, Coffee, Cults and Cats, and then everything else you could need, sources, social media, Patreon, all of that stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. In 2020, Ellen had reached a level of fame so high that you didn't even need to use her last name. She was one of Hollywood's biggest success stories until everything came crashing down. And although a lot of people know about Ellen's downfall, they don't know the full story and how it was always inevitable. Ellen went through a lot of ups and downs in her career that spanned decades. But from the mid-2000s onward, she was unstoppable. She became one of the most famous people in the world, and not only was she also incredibly rich, had a beautiful wife, countless awards, and given every amazing opportunity in Hollywood, but Ellen was also incredibly well liked. Or so the public thought anyway. Over her career, there were claims by people working behind the scenes that Ellen wasn't as wholesome and kind as she portrayed herself to be. In 2020, stories from Ellen's staff, celebrities, and everyday people who had encountered Ellen in real life spoke about what she was really like behind the scenes. So today, we're going to be discussing everything about Ellen, her rise and fall in the 90s, her comeback, and her unmasking as one of the alleged meanest people in Hollywood. We're going to be diving into everything behind the scenes about Ellen and discussing all the stories you haven't heard, including ones shared with me by people who've clashed with Ellen over the years. Finally, we'll talk about what Ellen's doing today, because despite leaving Hollywood, she's still making headlines for all the wrong reasons. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to one of the biggest successes and biggest downfalls in Hollywood history, Ellen DeGeneres. If you were able to go back to the late 2000s and tell people back then that one of the biggest downfalls in Hollywood that would occur would be that of Ellen DeGeneres, a lot of people wouldn't believe you. And one of the most shocking things about Ellen's downfall is that it wasn't as if one thing happened and it all came crumbling down. In fact, Ellen's career was destroyed because she was unmasked as one of Hollywood's cruelest celebrities, and this had been going on for years. What's really crazy about Ellen's downfall is that despite it being very well known in Hollywood exactly the type of person she was still able to keep the truth about her behavior, and the behavior of other monsters on the set of her show completely under wraps from the general public. So before we talk about Ellen's downfall, we have to discuss her rise. Well, technically both of her rises, as Ellen does have one of the most fascinating histories and careers in Hollywood, and it's honestly wild looking at everything Ellen had, and she still chose to behave so terribly and treat people so badly. Ellen DeGeneres was born in Louisiana on January 26, 1958, and she has one brother named Vance. Her parents divorced when she was 15 in 1973, and shortly after, her mother Betty got remarried to a salesman named Roy Gruschendorf. Betty and Ellen moved from New Orleans to Atlanta, Texas, and Ellen's brother stayed with Ellen's father. Ellen's mother was diagnosed with breast cancer shortly after they moved, and Ellen's stepfather used this as an opportunity to prey upon her. Ellen said that her stepfather claimed he needed to examine her chest to check for lumps when she was about 15 or 16 years old, and she then said that he went on to try and her and she had to lock herself in her room. After she locked herself in her bedroom, her stepfather tried to break down her door and she ended up running away from home and having to spend the night in a hospital. A few years after this incident, Ellen told her mother Betty about it, but her mother didn't believe her and remained married to her stepfather for another 18 years. Betty said that she realized Ellen was telling the truth when her husband's story changed several times. Ellen's stepfather died in 1997, and it's hard to get exact dates, obviously, when you're just talking about people that were living in the 70s and 80s and weren't famous. But if you match up Ellen's interviews and timelines, it seems as though Ellen's mom had this change of heart just slightly before or around the time that her husband was passing away. And this was also when Ellen was hitting the first peak of her fame. After Ellen graduated from high school in May 1976, she moved back to New Orleans and attended the University of New Orleans, but left after one semester to go and work in a law office with her cousin. After leaving university and then later her job at the law office, she then spent about 3 years working odd jobs at places like JCPenney, TGI Fridays, and was also a house painter at one point. During this time, she started performing stand-up in coffee houses and little clubs, and eventually became the MC of Clyde County Comedy Club in New Orleans in 1981. And she then started touring nationally shortly after this, and in 1984, she was named Funniest Person in America by Showtime. In 1986, Ellen appeared on The Johnny Carson Show, and this appearance very much led on to a lot of her success in television and a significant number of roles and opportunities that she ended up getting. In 1989, Ellen had her first acting role on TV in an episode of Duet. Later in 1989, in the next TV season of 1989, the show Duet actually was given a spin-off, and even though Ellen was only in one episode, and that's the only thing that she'd done, her character of Margot Van Meter was put into the spin-off that was called Open House, and that ended up running from just 1989 to 1990, but she had a year of a recurring role on that show. In 1993, Ellen got her first movie role in Coneheads, which was a film based on sketches from SNL. Throughout the rest of the early and mid-90s, Ellen continued to get roles on television, but in 1994, she got her first really, really big role, and something that a lot of people don't get, which is her own self-titled TV show, Ellen. And this show ended up running for 5 seasons and was based on a lot of stuff from her life. Her show did do very well in the beginning, and she continued to get more and more opportunities through the mid-90s. She went on to have an appearance on shows like Roseanne in 1995, which Roseanne was one of the biggest shows on TV at that time. She also started doing a lot of writing and even writing for award shows like the 94th Emmys and the 38th and the 39th Grammy Awards. In 1996, when her show was at the peak of its popularity, she even got her own ride at Disney's Epcot with Bill Nye, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Alex Trebek. But the ride was Ellen's ride. It was called Ellen's Energy Adventure, and it was open for about 20 years, only closing in August 2017. As a lot of people, especially around my age and older, will be aware, in 1997, one of the most significant moments of Ellen's career happened, all from one episode of her TV show. And let me tell you, from this point on in the video, I have really been working the lesbian Hollywood phone tree the last couple of weeks, because if you think straight people couldn't wait to talk about how terrible Ellen was when everything happened in 2020, let me tell you, the lesbians had Ellen's number years ago, and I spoke to a lot of people for this video, even some of my L-word people, because Ellen actually dated someone from the L-word too, but we'll get into that in just a second. And I'm sure a lot of my other regular viewers will be able to put together who some of the sources might be from this video. Their names might even pop up later on. So in 1997, an episode of Ellen's show airs, and this episode had incredibly far-reaching effects on Ellen's career, but also had massive effects on the culture at the time. The episode of Ellen with this huge watershed moment was titled The Puppy Episode, as obviously they didn't want to give anything away that was going to happen. And as a lot of people know, in this episode, Ellen's character comes out as gay, and then also Ellen herself did in real life, even doing an interview with Time magazine that became an incredibly famous cover story. The Puppy episode actually also starred my first lesbian crush, Laura Dern. I remember seeing Jurassic Park in the movies, begging my parents to take me, even though I was 6, maybe 7, and I didn't even know what gay was, but I knew I liked Laura Dern. At the time when Ellen and Laura Dern's episode came out in 97, there was practically no gay representation on TV, certainly no positive representation anyway. The world was also very different for the LGBT community. I started boarding school in 97 when I was 11, and I have a very clear memory of sitting on my bedroom floor. The memory in my mind is so clear, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, you're gay, you can never tell anyone, this is just going to have to be something that is like a secret and you're going to have to pretend. And at that time, the only context I really had for someone that was a lesbian was Carol and Susan on Friends, and they were a literal punchline. So that was kind of the world that we were living in that time. And so it was a really big deal when Ellen came out, and a lot of people were not happy about it. She ended up doing a lot of interviews, and a lot of people were talking about it, but there was a lot of backlash. Advertisers started pulling out from her show, and even though the Puppy episode was the highest rated of the show at 36.1 million, which are insane numbers for today, but those were still really good for the 90s, the ratings fell off a cliff after the Puppy episode. The Puppy episode aired in the 96-97 season, which was season 4. Season 1 and 2 of Ellen's show pulled in between 22 and 21 million. Season 3 dropped a little bit to 17 million, but season 4, the Puppy episode obviously didn't affect it till way into the show, and it was still pulling about 17 million. But season 5 dropped to an average of 11 million. And by the time the season 5 finale came around, there was about 6 to 7 million people watching. All of the backlash, controversy, ads being pulled, and ratings falling meant that Ellen's show was cancelled. And after that, Ellen's career took a nosedive. She said she couldn't even get a phone call, never mind an actual part on a mainstream show. When Ellen came out in 97, she didn't just come out, but she also was open about who she was in a relationship with, which at the time was Anne Heche. Prior to Ellen's relationship with Anne, there were rumors about her in the late 80s and early 90s dating other women. Ellen herself has spoken in interviews about her first girlfriend, Kat Perkoff, who she actually lived with in New Orleans when she was in her early 20s. This relationship was long before she was famous, and sadly that relationship ended after her girlfriend tragically passed away in a car accident in 1980. Her relationship with Kat and Kat's passing inspired one of her routines, Phone Call to God. There was one other woman that she was linked to at the time that she started to become famous in the early and mid-90s, and this woman was a Hollywood producer named Teresa Boyd. They ended up splitting a few months before Ellen started dating Anne Heche. At this time in 1997, Anne Heche was a big star herself, and Anne had a very complicated life and struggles with mental health at points. She also had a very rough childhood, and of course, a lot of people will know Anne sadly passed away just a few years ago in 2022 when she was only 53. Her father actually was a closeted gay man, and he ended up passing away from AIDS, but when he was sick, he told people it was cancer due to all of the stigma at the time. When he passed away, Anne was only 14, and 3 months after that, her brother was killed in a car accident. Her parents were fundamentalists, and Anne has spoken in her book and many interviews about likening her childhood to being raised in a cult. She moved around a lot as a kid, but the family did end up going back to where her father was raised in Atlantic City in New Jersey. And I rarely mention this, but Miss G and I actually lived in New Jersey and right around Atlantic City for just shy of 3 years in like 2015, 2018. We lived actually in Mays Landing, which is only like 15-20 minutes outside Atlantic City. After Anne's brother and father passed away, she, her sister, and her mother moved to Chicago, and they went through a lot of financial struggles and just tough time in general. And obviously, Anne Heche is a massive deep dive in herself. This is very, very, very much scratching the surface, but just giving a little bit of background to explain what a big deal this was at the time for a big TV actress and a big movie actress to be together and be public about it. When it comes to Anne's career, when she was at the end of her senior year, she was scouted by an agent and offered an audition for a soap called Another World. She got the part, and this set her off on a great career trajectory for several years. She even ended up winning a Daytime Emmy in '91 for Outstanding Younger Actress after she played the dual role of twins on Another World from '87 to '91. After that, she started getting tons of other roles. She was in The Adventures of Huck Finn with Elijah Wood. I remember watching that when I was a kid. Wild Side, If These Walls Could Talk with Jada Pinkett Smith and Cher. Those roles are all through the early 90s, but also in '97 is when her career majorly blew up after she played the wife of an undercover FBI agent in Donnie Brasco. And of course, a lot of millennials will remember that same year in '97, she was in the masterpiece I Know What You Did Last Summer with Sarah Michelle Gellar, Freddie Prinze Jr., Ryan Phillippe, and Jennifer Love Hewitt. There's probably a potential video there for the Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jennifer Love Hewitt feud. One day before Ellen and Anne went public with their relationship, Anne was cast in a movie 6 Days and 7 Nights opposite Harrison Ford. This was a huge movie, and she was also cast in another starring role just after the news came out about her and Ellen in a movie with Vince Vaughn called Return to Paradise. But after those two movies, one she got obviously before the news came out, Anne has always said that she felt her career prospects as a leading woman were pretty much destroyed when she went public with her relationship with Ellen. When Ellen came out and went public with her relationship with Anne, I cannot tell you how big of a deal this was, both positively from the LGBT community that we're excited to have some sort of representation, especially lesbians and bi women in the 90s. It was just practically unheard of to have an out couple in Hollywood. And on the other side, it was also a big deal for people that were very homophobic. Ellen and Anne were threatened by agents, executives, managers not to do public events together, not to do press together, not to attend premieres together. Ellen was, of course, as I mentioned, fired from her show and it was cancelled. And Anne felt that her career was massively affected. She had people begging her not to go to premieres and events with Ellen. And Anne later said that she was fired from a $10 million picture deal and didn't do a studio movie for 10 years after coming out. When Anne asked to take Ellen to the premiere of her movie in '97 called Volcano, she was told no and got major pushback from the executives of the movie. She did end up taking Ellen to the premiere, and she later said in an interview, "I took Ellen to the premiere anyway, and I was ushered out by security before the movie even ended and was told I was not allowed to go to my own after party for fear they would get pictures of me with a woman." Anne Anne and Ellen had met at a Vanity Fair party the same year in 97, and they did go on to date through 2000. Ellen was also 11 years older than Anne, who was 28 at the time, and when their relationship went public, that was talked about a lot, along with rampant homophobia, and also the fact that Anne had previously been in public relationships with men. She had previously dated Steve Martin. And so that was also a narrative because bisexuals, people in the 90s couldn't conceive the thought of a bisexual, and they would talk about this whole turning someone gay. The end of Anne and Ellen's relationship was extremely messy. First, they ended up releasing apparently they released a joint statement to People magazine in August 2000 saying, "It's an amicable parting and we greatly value the 3.5 years we spent together." But Ellen claims she didn't have any part in this and didn't even know about the split. It was a surprise to her. And Ellen later said, "Anne walked out the door and I haven't spoken to her since. I don't have any answers." At the time, the tabloids reported that Anne Heche had cheated on and left Ellen for a cameraman named Coleman LaFoon, who Anne did actually go on to marry. In an interview from 2020, Anne said, "I broke up with Ellen because her goal was to have a lot of money. Mine was to find love, and hers was, I want 60 billion. Good luck, our forks are never going to meet." Anne also claimed Ellen tried to control everything about her and her life, even what she wore. And Anne said that when she was on Ally McBeal with Ellen's future wife Portia and ended up hearing that Portia had started dating Ellen, Anne said that she warned Portia about Ellen and her controlling ways. Put a pin in Ellen and Portia and the controlling and everything just for a minute, because we have to talk about that and the other person Ellen dated from the L Word. But I just want to catch up on her career for the few years there while she was dating Anne. And I really do mean put a pin in it for a minute, because in short, from 97 to 2003, there wasn't much going on in Ellen's career due to all of the backlash from her publicly coming out. As I said, her show ended one season after she came out, and her mainstream visibility dipped majorly. She did get another show about her and her life called The Ellen Show that lasted only one season from 2001 to 2002. And one thing people might think while watching this video is, wow, Ellen's had a lot of shows with her name in the title. And most of the time, I do find when that happens, it's all about the ego. And that does make sense for Ellen, in my opinion. Sometimes that does happen for other reasons, like if there's a show with a title that there's already a show exists with the same title, that they'll put someone's name. So in the UK, there's a game show called Richard Osman's House of Games, and they called it that because there's a show in, I think it's Japan, that's called House of Games. Richard Osman is definitely the last person that would have that ego thing. And I've also heard him talk about the fact that they had to do that because of the existing show with the same name. And this is just a very, very, very brief aside. I know a lot of my audience like hearing about behind the scenes stuff. Trust me, listen to Richard Osman's podcast with the journalist Marina Hyde. I'll leave it linked in the sources along with everything else that I've used to make this video, but it is a really great behind the scenes podcast and current Hollywood event stuff. And it's on YouTube and it's called The Rest is Entertainment. After Ellen's show was cancelled in 1998, she did still continue to get work, even though she does rewrite history a lot and say that she didn't have anything at all. But she did work pretty consistently through the late 90s and early 2000s. And she even got a second show, The Ellen Show, that came out in 2001, but it only lasted for one season, 18 episodes, and was cancelled in 2002. In 2001, things started to pick up significantly again for Ellen, and she started to get guest starring appearances on big mainstream shows again. In 2001, she guest starred as a nun on Will and Grace. And that year, she also hosted SNL for the first time, and she hosted the Emmys that year too. She started to really get a lot of good roles in 2001 and 2002, but 2003 is when things really, really blew up. And her career not only fully recovered, but absolutely exploded well past the heights it was in 1997. She did a stand-up special in 2003 after not having done any stand-up specials since 2000, and this one was through HBO and was called Ellen DeGeneres Here and Now. The 2001-2002 show that she had, The Ellen Show, was a disaster, and it got not only poor ratings, but people really didn't like it. But the company that made the show, Telpix, who are a Warner Brothers subsidiary, they ended up really believing in Ellen's star power. So that's when they decided that they were going to give her a third shot. And this is when the talk started about a syndicated talk show starring Ellen. Personally, I've just never got the whole Ellen thing. Maybe it's because I was in school through the 2000s, and by the time I would have been able to watch her daytime show, I had heard enough stories about her to know she was a complete fake. So I don't know why these people were so hell-bent on making Ellen a thing. My friend Rosie O'Donnell had a very successful talk show from 96 to 2002, and Tell Pictures produced Rosie's show too. So after that ended in 2002, and they had this whole deal with Ellen, they made her other show. It had been cancelled in 2002. Maybe it was just that simple, but these people were really, really invested in more ways than one in making Ellen successful. The Ellen DeGeneres Show, her syndicated talk show, launched in September 2003, but in May 2003, Ellen had a huge explosion in her career, and that's because the movie Finding Nemo came out in May 2003, where she voiced one of the main characters, Dory. And Finding Nemo wasn't just a successful Disney movie, it was incredibly successful. And Finding Nemo is actually the best-selling DVD title of all time, with 40 million copies sold, which is crazy because when it was released on DVD, it was also released on VHS. So some people lost out on DVD sales because they will have bought the VHS, but it still became the best selling of all time. And it did so in 2 weeks. Finding Nemo had a budget of $94 million, but made an incredible $940 million, 10 times the budget. Ellen ended up being cast as Dory because the director, Andrew Stanton, saw an episode of Ellen's show and watched her change the subject 5 times before finishing one sentence, and that's when he knew that she would be perfect for the role. Before Ellen, the character of Dory was actually going to be a male fish. As I just mentioned Will and Grace very briefly, one really interesting fact about Finding Nemo that I never really see anybody mention is that Megan Mullally, who played Karen Walker on Will and Grace, she actually was cast in Finding Nemo. And whenever she came in, the producers were really stunned that her real voice wasn't the voice that she does for Karen Walker on Will and Grace. But the producers and the director, they hired her anyway and said, "Oh, we really want you to do the Karen Walker voice." But Megan said she didn't want to do that. And after that, she was let go from the project. You know, I love to give you random facts. So I mentioned Jurassic Park earlier too. And the shark in Finding Nemo that's named Bruce is named Bruce because they named it after the animatronic shark that Steven Spielberg used in Jaws. And his Jaws shark was named after his divorce lawyer, Bruce Raymond. Finding Nemo was also nominated for a ton of awards, BAFTAs, Critic Choice Awards, Saturn Awards, Emmys, Golden Globes, and even won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature in 2004. Ellen also won a Kids' Choice Award and a Saturn Award in 2004 and was nominated for a bunch of others like an MTV Movie Award. So by September 2003, when her new daytime talk show launched, she was really back on top. Ellen's talk show launched on NBC with the very first guest being Jennifer Aniston, and Jennifer Aniston was also the very last guest when the show ended in May 2022 after 19 seasons and 3,339 episodes. The show was nominated for 171 daytime Emmys. It won 63 of those daytime Emmys and even surpassed Oprah for the record number of Emmys in the Outstanding Talk Show category. Ellen's show featured a lot of the usual talk show stuff, celebrity interviews. They would come on and talk about upcoming projects, audience participation, games, and Ellen did implement a lot of new things. The very first decade of the show, she did a lot of dancing and other little fun segments. Ellen's show would sometimes come and shoot at Universal Studios in Orlando, and there was definitely one time that I went with like my annual pass and her show just happened to be shooting there. One thing that Ellen's show was really at the forefront of was social media and virality, and she was at the forefront of this in kind of two different ways. The first way she was very unique about social media and virality was that she was really one of the first shows to bring on non-famous people who were experiencing some sort of 15 minutes of fame, and there are a bazillion examples of this. She would have people like Alex from Target, a lot of meme people, even people like Justin Bieber who were starting to blow up on YouTube. There's also a weight loss YouTuber I followed for years and years, Obese to Beast. John is his real name. And he ended up posting a video about 10 years ago now where he lost, I think it was about 160 pounds, and he showed all of his loose skin. And again, this was 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. And this video went absolutely viral. It has 10 million views today, which then was even more insane. I mean, 10 million now is also insane. And John ended up being invited onto the show, and he's done a video on it, which of course I'll link in the sources. The Google link in the description box and the pinned comment will have all the sources that I've used to make this video, as always. And John did like a little interview on the show, and they also ended up giving him a car, my dream car, a Mustang. And he did a video like when Ellen ended up going through like all her backlash stuff about 3 years ago. And he said in the video from 3 years ago that it's still the car that he drives today. Ellen's show did do things like that, like giveaways and stuff, but they were always sponsored by companies. Like John's car, as I said, was a Mustang. It was Ford that paid for that. And keep the giveaway donation stuff in the front of your mind, because we will come back to that when we talk about Ellen's cancellation. One thing a lot of the non-famous guests would talk about is that whenever they would go on the show, they didn't speak to or weren't allowed to speak to Ellen at all. It was only when they were on the stage with her that was the only interaction that they had with her. The other way that Ellen was kind of ahead of the curve when it comes to social media is that her show really got on YouTube before a lot of other ones, and they pumped out clips, episodes, all types of videos and other content on social media platforms, but that is another thing that I will come back to in just a minute. I want to talk about Ellen dating Jodie Foster's wife, but before we go into that, I just want to mention Ellen's tagline or mantra that she would end every show with, and that was "be kind." Sometimes she'd say "be kind to each other." This was deeply ironic and also played into a lot of the backlash against Ellen in 2020, because according to pretty much anyone who ever encountered Ellen or worked with her, she was pretty much the opposite of kind. Ellen ended up using this "be kind" from September 2010, and the reason she started using it is because there was a story that got a lot of media attention in September 2010 about a awful and really sad incident where a student who was a freshman in university, Tyler Clementi, he was only 18, he ended up taking his own life after his roommate had filmed him kissing another man in their dorm room. Tyler had asked his roommate, Darun Ravi, if he could have their room because he was going to have a date. And when Ravi ended up leaving the room, he had set up a webcam where he recorded Tyler and his date. Ravi then tweeted out the video and another tweet saying that Tyler was gay. And this video obviously was seen by students in the university. After Tyler was made aware of this video, he ended up taking his own life. The story got a lot of national attention, and even the president at the time, Barack Obama, spoke about this tragedy. Ellen spoke about Tyler at the end of one of her episodes, and she ended up using this "be kind to one another." And from that point on, she'd always used it. Of course, it being Ellen, she also went on to make a massive amount of merchandise with this "be kind" line on it. Everything from socks and underwear to cups and notepads and just anything you could think of. So we'll hit pause on discussing Ellen's show for just a second to discuss what's going on in the rest of her life. In the first half of the 2000s, everything's pretty much perfect for Ellen. She's filthy rich. She has this new show. She's buying properties left, right, and center. NBC also started putting her as herself in a bunch of their other properties like The Bernie Mac Show and the Friends spinoff Joey.
Next time on Ellen, from the new movie Captured, Ellen welcomes Joey Tribbiani. Next time on Ellen.
Yeah, suck on that, Oprah.
During the mid-2000s, she also appeared in a ton of other popular shows like The Simpsons and 6 Feet Under.
I'm not supposed to allow anybody in.
Oh, I understand, but, I'm Ellen. It's my show.
Creepy Colin Farrell just left me another creepy message. Can't we do something about that?
In 2005, Ellen again hosted the Emmys, and 2 years later, in 2007, she hosted the Oscars for the first time, which was a massive deal. From the year 2000, when Ellen was going through her difficult time, to 2004, where she's had a year of Finding Nemo and The Ellen Show success, she was dating a photographer, director, and actress called Alexandra Hedson, who, as I mentioned, went on to marry Jodie Foster. Acting-wise, Alex did a lot of one-off episodes in the 90s, like episodes of Melrose Place and Clark and Lois, but her biggest role was 14 episodes of The L Word. Her first episode was in 2006, and her last one was in 2009 during the final and sixth season. Personally, I wasn't a fan of the character at all, and I'm not really a fan of her performance, but I've heard nice things about her from people behind the scenes, and as I frequently mention, there is no show I know more shit about than The L Word. Me spilling L Word's set secrets was pretty much what my original channel was, and a lot of the people I spoke to for this video I met through covering The L Word, being on the L Word set, being at L Word rap parties, friends I met through covering The L Word, stuff like that. Also, there is no show more connected to all the Hollywood lesbian drama than The L Word. And I think to illustrate my point, I'll show you some clips that someone else filmed where Rosie O'Donnell is pulling me through a bar in LA at the L Word finale party. And in the room is Chrishell and G-Flip, Fletcher, Jack Tabani, Laurel Holloman, Jamie Clayton, and a ton of other people. So a lot of, as I said, the information, this is where it's all coming from. So Alex and Ellen dated from 2000 to 2004, and they broke up in the fall of 2004. But one problem was when they broke up, they had done an interview for The Advocate, and that interview didn't come out until January 2005. For the interview, they were putting Ellen on the cover, and they were majorly promoting the fact that the pictures for this cover had been taken by Alex. The cover story and the interview talks about how happy they were together. And when it came out, it looked kind of weird because they had already broken up and there wasn't really tons of time between the interview and it going to print. So while I think it's funny and we're sharing that Ellen dated someone from the L Word that went on to marry Jodie Foster and that they had an interview talking about how happy they were that ended up coming out after they broke up, my favorite story about Ellen and Alex's relationship is the absolutely diabolical lesbian drama that ended up happening with the house that they lived in together when they were in a relationship. They're together for 4 years. They are living in this house that's owned by Ellen. They break up. Ellen ends up selling this $3 million open plan ranch house to a woman who's also a lesbian called Allison Milgard. She also works in Hollywood. She hasn't done a huge amount of work in Hollywood, and I wasn't able to find much information about this online, but one of my friends did tell me that Allison is also a window heiress. And not only did Ellen sell her house that she lived in with Alex to Allison, but Allison's next girlfriend was Alex, who was Ellen's ex. So Ellen sold her house to Alex and her new girlfriend. But wait, there's more. That happened in 2007. And then 7 years later, Ellen and Portia bought the house back from Allison. Of course, by that stage, Alex and Allison had broken up and Alex had gone on to marry Jodie Foster, but I just think that's like the most Hollywood lesbian story ever. When Jodie Foster and Alex got together, Jodie Foster had just ended her relationship with the other mother of her 2 sons, Cindy Bernard, and they got together in 2008. And whenever they got together, I have it on pretty good authority that allegedly Ellen DeGeneres was really, really pissed that Jodie started dating Alex because they were friends. I'm not sure whether they still are. And Ellen actually tried to talk Jodie out of dating her and then later tried to talk her out of marrying her, allegedly. So through the rest of the 2000s, Ellen's show is incredibly successful and is averaging about 4.2 million viewers an episode. At this time, Ellen also starts doing an insane amount of commercials and product promotion. In 2008, she started working with CoverGirl, and in 2010, she signed a 5-year deal with Fox to replace Paula Abdul as a judge on American Idol. Although Ellen signed a deal for 5 seasons with American Idol, she did leave after 1, and this is alleged. I've heard this from a few people, but it's not something that I've heard from someone that's like actually on the show or saw it with their own eyes. But apparently there were issues with Ellen's behavior, demands, and the fact that she couldn't have everything completely centered to her, as obviously there were other judges and other celebrities on Idol, and that was where a lot of the issues came from and why she allegedly decided to leave the show. In 2014, Ellen hosted the Oscars again, and at the ceremony, Ellen organized a selfie that was taken live, and it featured some of the biggest stars at the time, so it went incredibly viral due to all these famous faces. But yikes, what a group when you look at it now. There's a few okay people, but God, some of the people in this group were exposed for being pretty awful. And there are a few others who it isn't super publicly known, but they either enabled awful behavior or they just are people who behave extremely badly behind the scenes and are more in line with how Ellen treats people. In 2016, as if Ellen was not killing it enough and making enough money, she did Finding Dory, the sequel to Finding Nemo that ended up coming out 13 years later. The movie, just like Finding Nemo, was very successful, and although the budget was double that of Finding Nemo at $200 million, the movie made just over $1 billion. It's believed that Ellen made a minimum of $10 million for her voice work on Finding Dory, and at this stage, she was making about $50 million a year from her talk show, as Ellen not only was the host of the show, but she also owned the production company, A Very Good Production, that was making the show. By this time in 2016, not only did she have all her partnerships and sponsorships through things like American Express, her commercial for it actually even won an Emmy, but she also had expanded into a ton of brands and product productions. In 2014, she launched a line through QVC, and in 2015, she launched her own lifestyle brand, ED, and produced everything from clothes, shoes, pet stuff, home stuff. And a year after Finding Dory in 2017, she launched a brand called Be Kind to Elephants after it was announced that President Trump would allow the import of elephant trophies into the US. This brand mostly sold t-shirts with the Be Kind to Elephants slogan on it. Also in 2017, she launched a line of dog products at PetSmart, and later in the year, she launched a line for cats. She also still was the spokesperson for tons of products like CoverGirl and JCPenney. Just before we get into all of the controversy and backlash, I want to discuss Ellen's wife, Portia. Ellen and Portia met when Ellen was still with Alex, and Portia also had a girlfriend at the time, but wasn't out publicly. As I mentioned earlier in the video, a lot of people have reported that Anne Heche cheated on Ellen, and there were also reports that Ellen and Portia got together while Anne and Ellen were still dating and Portia was still dating her previous partner, but there was never definitive proof either way. Portia talks in interviews about not being out when she met Ellen, so Ellen didn't know. And obviously I don't know this for a fact, but I'd be really shocked if Ellen didn't know, because even today there are still so many celebrities who are lesbians or gay or bisexual, and there's kind of two options now in Hollywood. There are actors who are open about it behind the scenes but don't acknowledge it publicly or talk about it publicly or say the words I come out or anything like that, but it becomes pretty obvious if you're looking closely. I would say one of the biggest stars in the world falls into this category at the moment, but then there's the other side. There are actors and musicians who it is known that they're gay, but it's something that they really, really don't want people knowing. And these are the celebrities that you'll see in like orchestrated PR relationships. So I would think that Ellen was aware that Portia was gay when they met. But regardless, to me, it seems as though they waited for the Advocate cover to come out that I mentioned with Ellen and Alex, and then they started dating. So Portia is an Australian actress, and her name isn't even actually Portia de Rossi. Her name now is Portia Lee James DeGeneres, but she was born Amanda Lee Rogers. So she really went all out with the name. Portia ended up marrying a filmmaker named Mel Metcalf in 1996, and she herself has even said this. They originally got married for a green card, and I can tell you it is very, very difficult to get a green card. I had 2 visas and then I had a green card. I mean, this, when she was going through like immigration and stuff, it was the 90s. It is a lot more difficult post 9/11, but you have to, one, spend a lot of money, forms, questions, background checks, police reports that hopefully say nothing, obviously, and even like blood tests. And it's a process. I had 2 visas like under my dad. And when I turned 21, I had to get my own or get a green card or get out. and I had applied for the green card, but they don't tell you like, oh, you know, this will take 6 months or it will come by this date. Like you just have to wait. And it took basically 2 years. And my birthday is the 20th of December. And I remember by the 15th, it hadn't come. And you can't even like call and check. So I was like, oh, you know, if it gets to the 19th, I'm going to have to leave. And my girlfriend at the time, her dad was gay. And we always used to joke like, if it gets to the 19th, you know, we're going to get married. But obviously I think it came on like the 17th. So I was good. But yeah, it's quite a process. Portia and her ex-husband divorced in 1999, and from 2000 to 2004, she dated a director named Francesca Griogorni, who is actually Ringo Starr's stepdaughter. Portia is most well known for her roles in Ally McBeal, Arrested Development, Better Off Ted, and Nip Tuck, which I used to love that show in the 2000s, but I wonder what it would be like watching it now. She and Ellen got married in 2008 when it was legalized in California, and Portia hasn't really worked a huge amount after marrying Ellen and actually said in 2018 that she's retiring from acting. Ellen and Portia move a lot. They do house flipping and stuff like that, but they have moved 24 times in 18 years. And even I think that's wild. And I went to school in like 5 countries before I was even 16. And it's especially wild when you are so rich. Ellen and Portia also renewed their wedding vows for Portia's 50th birthday just 2 years ago in 2023. And it was officiated by one of their best friends, Kris Jenner. I mean, oh my God, could you pick a worse person? A lot of people have this save Portia narrative and Portia's controlled, but I don't know, if you're with someone for 20 years and with them all the time and see how they treat people, I mean, they also have like tons of staff and stuff like that. Usually the person's okay with it, but obviously I don't know. I've never met them. I've never seen their dynamic, seen what they're like, and I know that there definitely are good people that are married to awful people. Believe me, I know a lot of people that that's the case. Honestly, I don't really hear that much about Portia, even through the Hollywood lesbian phone tree, because I think that Ellen just kind of overshadows everything and anything. I mean, even Portia's 50th birthday was Ellen and Portia renewing their vows and putting out a ton of positive press and PR to try and rehab Ellen's image, because you cannot tell me that vow renewal was just about them renewing their vows. Like, it was the most staged Hollywood PR-y thing. They probably broke their leg running to give people the pictures and the exclusive, and it was stacked with celebrities too, and the type of celebrities that are going to generate clicks and people talking about it. There were people like obviously Kris Jenner, Meghan and Harry, and a lot of like the Friends cast and people were there. So there's kind of people that generate clicks and views for good reasons, controversial reasons, all of that stuff. So we're going to set the scene for what happened with the massive backlash against Ellen. And this all started in March 2020. We're up to about 2017 in our timeline before we talked about Portia. So just to pick things up in 2018, as I said several times in the video, at this point, Ellen could not be more successful. She couldn't be bigger, but she did make more money, as in 2018, Ellen became the first woman to be given $20 million for her Netflix special. And apparently this $20 million was contingent on Ellen doing 2 shows that were an hour long each. So I guess that is why she ended up having to do the 2024 special For Your Approval that she ended up releasing after all of the controversy. And that sure was a sight to behold, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. Ellen hadn't done stand-up since 2003 when she did the Here and Now special on HBO. She had got a lot of money over the years from comedy specials, but as an executive producer, she especially executive produces a lot of Tig Notaro's specials. And Tig Notaro is married to the lovely Stephanie Allen, who was also on the L Word Generation Q. Another little hint about the lesbian phone tree. And Tig will actually be mentioned again when it comes to one of the most viral clips involved in Ellen's downfall. But Ellen's special with Netflix, the title was Relatable, which the special is just as obnoxious as the title suggests. I obviously watched the special for this video, but I never would have watched this if it wasn't for the video because, as I mentioned, I've just always heard that she was horrendous behind the scenes and her comedy just doesn't appeal to me. So I did also look up reviews from the time to see what people thought, and a lot of the articles and reviews seem like generated fluff, unsurprisingly. Honestly, some of these reviews, I hope they were produced due to some sort of incentive because they are like falling over themselves to talk about how awesome it is that Ellen was paid 20 million to spend 68 minutes bragging about how famous and rich she is. And they then go on to delusionally claim she is totally still relatable. There's also a chunk in the special where Ellen whines about her be kind mantra. And literally, there's a quote in Vulture where one of the reviewers says, "The sharpest, most deeply felt material comes when Ellen talks about the gift and burden of her role as a celebrity and daytime talk show host." The reviewer from Vulture then goes on to explain about how Ellen feels locked into her hosting identity as a cheerful person, how it restricts her behavior in public, and how it is a millstone around her neck. I mean, give me a bloody break. A millstone around her neck. Yeah, being super rich and famous, what a burden. Probably the only thing worse than this special was the 2024 special For Your Consideration that Ellen also did for Netflix, which we will get into. By 2020, Ellen was estimated by Forbes to be worth $450 million and was earning about $84 million a year. Portia had retired from acting, as I mentioned, so she was focused on flipping the houses. She's very passionate about horses and being a perfect wife and catering to Ellen's career. Forbes also listed Ellen as the 12th highest paid entertainer in the world, and she was constantly in top 50 this, top 50 Forbes most powerful women in the world. And she also had an enormous following on social media. She always ranked in like the top 15, 20 of most followed people on Twitter with over 75 million followers, although she has now removed her Twitter as a lot of the backlash started on Twitter. She does still have her show Twitter that has like 71 million followers, but they don't really post that much anymore. On Instagram, she still has her personal Instagram that has over 135 million. And she does still have like her shop, the Ellen shop, like the one through the show on Instagram. And then she still does have her lifestyle brand Instagram that's just shy of 1 million followers. But you can see that the interaction and just people's sort of desire to be involved in what she's doing and stuff has just dropped off a cliff, because even her lifestyle brand that has just under 1 million followers, there's like 60 to 100 likes on posts. I mean, Miss G is close to hitting 6,000 followers and she annihilates the likes on any of Ellen's brand post, which, I mean, obviously justifiably so, but you have 1 million followers and you're getting 60 to 100 likes. That's pretty horrendous. One place that she does still get a lot of interaction and make a lot of money is YouTube. She has over 38 million subscribers and over 23 billion views. They still post on the Ellen Show YouTube channel every day and multiple times a day. They post clips, full episodes, compilations of guests, and there really isn't that much of a difference between the views that they get now, the views that they got in 2020 and 2016. And except for a few small dips here and there, they are still getting millions and millions of views. And most months, she's getting between 15 and 20 million views, which is astronomical. And yes, some of the videos are 10, 15 minutes, but a lot of them are 30, 40 minutes, over an hour. Some of the compilations are even 2.5 hours. So I would conservatively guess that she is making well over $1 million a year just on YouTube views alone. I mean, that is like the absolute bare minimum that she's making, in my opinion. So in March 2020, Ellen is on top of the world. Successful show, successful movies, executive producing, filthy rich, $96 million house, sponsorships this, commercials that, lifestyle brands, beautiful wife. She literally is flipping houses here and there, hosting award shows, winning awards, being given medals of freedom. I mean, she had everything and anything, but her entire world got brought down in 2020, and it all started with a single tweet. Of course, in March 2020, the world was also going through a lot. So a comedian named Kevin Porter put out a tweet on the 20th of March 2020, right when things were getting really intense with all of the lockdowns and things. And so Kevin said, right now, we all need a little kindness, you know, like Ellen DeGeneres always talks about. She's also notoriously one of the meanest people alive. Respond to this with the most insane stories you've heard about Ellen being mean, and I'll match everyone with $2 to the LA Food Bank. This tweet went absolutely viral. It got a ton of responses. It was retweeted like crazy, and it was shared so many other places and across all other platforms. You might look at it and think, oh, it only has 59,000 likes. I mean, that's obviously a lot of likes, but it's not millions and millions. But obviously Twitter is like the smallest of the big social medias, but this was picked up in so many articles. People on YouTube were talking about it. It was everywhere. This tweet absolutely opened the floodgates, and what always happens when celebrities or YouTubers or influencers have a controversy is that people bring up things from their past, and also people dig into their past, and they'll usually find things the celebrity really wishes they didn't. There were a few clips that started to circulate pretty immediately after this tweet went viral, and one of these clips became probably the most famous Ellen Show clip, certainly of the whole controversy, but maybe of all time, and that is the Dakota Johnson clip. And this is a situation where a successful Nepo baby celebrity was the best person for this. I'm going to show bits of the clip, but I have to be kind of short with it because Ellen's show is extremely copyright claimy, and I've heard a ton of people say that they will falsely copyright claim things, so I don't want to give Ellen even more money to put on her pile because they will literally claim the video over a few seconds and take all of the revenue, and even sometimes they can have control of how many ads. They can also take down the video if they really go through all of that. So I have to keep the clip to a limited number of seconds. But basically what happens is Ellen has Dakota Johnson come on. Dakota Johnson has just had her birthday, and Ellen says, oh, I wasn't invited to your party. And Dakota Johnson says,
actually, no, that's not the truth, Ellen. You were invited.
last time I was on the show,
Last year, you gave me a bunch of about not inviting you, but I didn't even know you wanted to be invited.
and you can see Ellen start to panic a bit. And she was saying, well, of course I want to be invited. It's a party. Of course I wanted to be. And Dakota Johnson says, well,
Well, I didn't even know you liked me.
and then Ellen's like, of course I like you. Of course I like you. And it's so awkward. And you can see Ellen just wants to probably strangle her. And they have like a little bit of a back and forth. And Ellen's like, are you sure you invited me? Are you sure you invited me? Dakota then says,
Ask everybody. Ask Jonathan, your producer.
I was invited. Why didn't I go?
Ellen then tries to like move it along and says, oh, yeah, I was out of town. Ellen then says, oh, didn't Tig Notaro perform at your birthday? And Dakota Johnson just finishes her off and says, oh, yeah, she's so great. She's my favorite comedian, which is just, it's hilarious.
She's hilarious.
She's my favorite comedian. Other than you.
Actually, Dakota Johnson, she did a movie with Tig Notaro and her wife, Stephanie Allen, who I mentioned earlier was in the L Word Generation Q. Stephanie and Tig directed it, and Dakota Johnson stars in it. It's called Am I Okay? It's on HBO. It's actually pretty good. What a lot of people don't know about this clip is why Ellen wasn't at Dakota Johnson's birthday. I mean, obviously, we don't know if she would have actually gone if she wasn't doing what I'm about to tell you what she was doing. But there was also a viral story about what Ellen was doing, but I just don't think a lot of people put together that they were on the same weekend. And that was when Ellen got into some controversy in November 2019, and that was when she attended a Dallas Cowboys game in Texas with George W. Bush. That is what she was actually doing the weekend of Dakota Johnson's party. Obviously, when Ellen and Bush went to this game, it was found out immediately and it got a lot of backlash, so much so that Ellen ended up even addressing it in the opening monologue of her next episode of the show. So this controversy with Bush and then later the tweet with Dakota, those happened only a few months before this tweet went out. So whenever everything started coming out about the tweet and all of the other stories started being shared, people were very quick to then share the Dakota Johnson tweet and then start talking about the Bush football game again. As I mentioned, there's always been a plethora of stories about how terrible Ellen has treated people over the years. And so when this tweet started being shared and the clips and everything else, people started talking about other controversies from Ellen's past. And one of the biggest ones was her behavior in the 2007 writers' strike. Ellen continued to produce new episodes of her talk show in 2007 without union writers during the strike, which began in November 2007. A lot of the late night talk shows and other shows like that on the air stopped production in solidarity with the Writers Guild of America. Ellen's behavior at the time was very much seen as crossing the picket line, and the WGA criticized her, justifiably so. They even issued a statement saying Ellen is not showing the same support to her writers the other hosts have shown. Ellen ended up canceling a taping in New York because she was so worried about being confronted by writers that were picketing, as obviously in LA, she's in an Ellen bubble and she can go in and out of the studio in a car, but in New York, she would have been confronted. One other clip that was shared a lot when everything started coming out was a clip from her show where Ellen screws up a sponsorship with Shutterfly. There was a woman that had been invited on the show. She's not famous or anything like that. And she was working a lot and trying to put herself through dental school.
She even donated blood every week for 6 months to earn enough money to buy a computer. I'm not in a position to help her financially, but I'm hoping maybe you can. Well, I sure can.
She'd come on the show and Ellen was kind of setting up a spot where it looked like they were going to say, oh, we've paid for all of your schooling or a semester or a year of tuition, because she was doing that thing where they're asking, oh, how much are your fees? And, you know, how difficult is that for you? And the woman says that, you know, her tuition costs $50K a year. And Ellen starts to say, my friends at Shutterfly are going to pay. And then she's cut off by one of her producers who was like, no, no, no.
And so I talked to my friends at Shutterfly. They want to help pay for.
And then he comes up and like whispers in Ellen's ear, and Ellen even says, oh, well, this is a little awkward, but
This is awkward, but so we're going to give you a computer. I have to. We have the computer.
it's just super, super awkward.
I have a computer, but okay, but it's a nice, it's a nice computer.
You would think, one, it's just insane that they aired this because Ellen isn't a live show. Like, why would you do this? Why would you, one, not re-record, but I guess Ellen doesn't like speaking to regular people more than she has to, but it's just so bizarre. Even cut the segment. Like, why? Why would you air this? It makes you look terrible. Or the thing that I think anybody who was worth $450 million, what they would do is they would say, well, I've screwed up. I'm going to pay your tuition. Even if you're like, oh, I don't want to pay for, 4 years or whatever it is, at least even say, I'm going to pay for a semester or I'll pay $50K for a year, because literally $50K to Ellen is like $5 to us. I mean, it's literally $5. If you make $50K a year, it's $5 and like 50 cents, the equivalent. It's just insane to me that they'd air it, but even more insane that you wouldn't be like, I'll pay it. Like, that would have even been a viral story. Like, lots of people would have talked about that if it would have been like, oh, Ellen made a mistake but made up for it. But Ellen only seems to do any sort of charity, giving people things, if it is someone else paying for it. So obviously at the time this is all going on, people had become really turned off by celebrities. The world was an absolute mess in 2020. I mean, it's kind of still a mess, and on top of all of that, they are just celebrities that are doing nothing all day but enjoying their money. So obviously when all of this is going on, March, April, May 2020, people were going through a lot. The world was an absolute mess. And I mean, it kind of still is. But then there was lockdowns. People couldn't send their kids to school. People were losing their jobs. They couldn't pay rent. And the one thing that people had no patience for were the celebrities that were whining about having to stay inside of their mansions. And there were so many celebrities that came off so badly during this time, talking about how they were basically being tortured because they had to stay in their mansion with fully stocked fridges and all their bills paid and pools and gyms and everything. And regular people were wondering if they're going to be able to keep their job and be able to pay rent. So everyone was pretty fed up with a lot of the celebrities. G and I were actually living in a studio apartment that was attached to someone's house, and we started my original channel in January 2020. So I learned a lot through 2020 shooting and editing all of my videos on my phone because I didn't even have a laptop. But a lot of celebrities came across very badly during this time. And one of those celebrities was Ellen DeGeneres, who did nothing but complain and started her show by saying she felt like she was in jail. And again, she was living in a $96 million mansion. Ellen started shooting her show when everything got really bad in her house. And again, she just showed how little she cared about the people who worked on her show. When they started shooting her show at her home, the staff had no communication as to what was going on with their jobs. Were they working from Ellen's? Were they not? Were they being paid? What was the status of their employment? They were told nothing, even up to 2 weeks before they started shooting Ellen's show at home. And also, keep in mind, a lot of these people have been working on Ellen's shows for years and years. 1 month after the viral tweet in April 2020, Variety released an article that detailed what Ellen was doing in regards to her staff. Just before she started shooting at home, Ellen informed staff she would not use her regular loyal crew, but instead hired an outside non-union tech company that was much cheaper. Her crew were then emailed and told to expect a 60% reduction in pay. Now, keep in mind what I said earlier. Ellen's company produced The Ellen Show, and if they're producing it for cheaper, who benefits? Even more wildly, the show was still airing. The show was still generating all of its advertising revenue. They still are making a fortune, and I would bet my life that Ellen didn't take a 6% cut, never mind a 60% cut. All the other similar types of shows, like the late night shows, all continued to pay their staff, and some hosts even went into their own pockets. So all of that is happening. People are getting more and more angry with Ellen. Articles are coming out. And then in July 2020, BuzzFeed released an article where they spoke to 10 anonymous staff members of Ellen's show, and they went into a lot of detail about the behind the scenes at the Ellen Show, and it was horrendous. The way staff were treated was appalling. Staff spoke about the impacts on their mental health, their physical health. They spoke about racist behavior by producers and horrendously toxic atmospheres. Crew and staff were told not to speak to Ellen, not to even look at her, and a lot of those types of stories matched up with what people who spoke out during Kevin's tweet were saying. There also were members of the crew who spoke about producers allegedly sexually harassing other crew members and creating uncomfortable environments. Ellen was also said to pick someone different every day and treat them poorly. She wanted people to give their everything, but constantly attacked them and their work. There even was one employee who spoke to BuzzFeed who was going through health difficulties, and they ended up putting up a GoFundMe as the insurance they had was terrible and cheap. And when they put the GoFundMe up to get some help, they were told by the producers to take it down because it made Ellen look bad.
I'm Sarah McLaughlin, and for just $1 a day, you can help save one of these abused and terrified grips from the Ellen DeGeneres Show.
More and more articles came out after this BuzzFeed piece, and more people started sharing their stories about Ellen, even people who just had encountered her in everyday life. At this time, a lot of celebrities like Ashton Kutcher started saying ridiculous things like, "Oh, Ellen was always really nice to me," another rich and famous celebrity. Unsurprisingly, after all of what we've talked about, the next season of Ellen's Show, season 19, was the last. The ratings dropped immensely after 2020 and all of this backlash, and people were talking non-stop about how awful Ellen's behavior and her treatment of her staff was. Ellen did also try and pretend it was her decision and the show was not being cancelled and had nothing to do with any of the backlash she was facing. After the show ended in May 2022, Ellen laid low for a bit, but she did start pushing out a lot of fluffy PR stuff, like, as I mentioned, the vow renewal. In my opinion, maybe she didn't solely do the vow renewal for the attention and PR and people exclusive, but it certainly seemed to be a big factor in why she did it. Even like the people that were invited to it, the Kardashians and Harry and Meghan and all of this stuff, like, why would it be a people exclusive and everything? It just seems to me like it was done solely for attention and trying to drum up positive press. Work-wise, Ellen did do a few things between May 22 when the show ended and then 2024. She did like a documentary about gorillas, But her main thing after the show ended was the 2024 Netflix special that I mentioned, which was called For Your Approval. And she says this is her last stand-up special. This Netflix special was even worse than the first one, and it was painful to watch. In the first one, she whined about how she was so rich and famous, yet was still so relatable. And in this special, she does kind of the exact same thing, but then there's a second part where the main theme of the special is her complaining about being thrown out of Hollywood. This special throughout is horrendous, but the worst part is the first couple of minutes. There's basically 2 minutes of this dramatically, terribly acted poor me segment where Ellen's like getting ready in her dressing room and walking to the stage. And she even walks up a set of steps that has quotes on them of what people said in like the articles and tweets about her. And the faces that she makes at the camera and everything, it's just so over the top and cringe. If you are an audio listener only to this video episode, whatever you want to call it, I really implore you to either look at the screen if you can while I'm showing this, or go to YouTube if you're just listening on like Apple or Spotify, or even just like start the Netflix special if you have Netflix for the first 2 minutes so you can see this, because it is wild that she would do this, or that somebody wouldn't be like, this is a bad idea. But at the end of the poor me segment, she walks on stage and then there's literally a minute or two of her just watching people cheering for her. And I would love to speak to someone who was in the audience of this and hear the instructions that they were given, because the people in the audience are acting like Ellen walked out and said she's going to give them all $1 million each. They are flipping out. And it just goes on for so long. Even just watching it, the first thing that I was thinking with the terrible cringe bit and then the bit about all of like the clapping and things, all I could think was this would die a death on YouTube. Like, you probably would lose like 96% of the people watching. The retention graph would be like that, because what is it? Oh God, it's just so terrible. Sorry to keep talking about it. It's just awful. Also in 2024, it came out that Ellen and Portia had sold their $96 million California home and a ton of their other homes and moved to the Cotswold in England. Some pictures have popped up of Ellen at places like Jeremy Clarkson's pub, which seems pretty fitting, because if you don't know who Jeremy Clarkson is, he is a UK presenter who presented Top Gear and like tons of other stuff. And he was let go from Top Gear for being horrendous to staff. Ellen and Portia bought a $20 million home in the Cotswolds, which is a super nice, fancy area with loads of land and horse people and everything like that. So they seem to be settling in England, but then it just came out probably a month or two ago that they actually are selling their house in the Cotswolds. And there's different rumors about why they're selling it. A lot of people have said that they want to get a bigger estate. They want to get a bigger estate with more stables. I would probably guess, since Portia apparently is into riding so much, that they'll probably get a place with like an indoor riding facility, because I've never lived in England, but obviously Ireland and the Isle of Man, it's the same weather as England, and it's cold, dark, and wet in the winter. So they probably want like an indoor facility. And as I said, they flipped houses and moved 24 times in 18 years. So maybe they're on track for keeping the same moving energy in England. So for now, Ellen has gone quiet. Apart from the odd picture here and there that pops up, she hasn't really been making any noise. I would be surprised if we never hear from her again. She never does anything again, because having that level of fame and for so long, she's addicted to it. But maybe she got it out of her system with the Netflix special and how badly it was received, and seeing, oh, people are still mad even though Kris Jenner renewed our vows or whatever she was trying to do with that. And maybe she really is truly done, as I did very, very briefly mention this before, but the Netflix special, the second one, the 2024 one, For Your Approval, it was actually contracted that she had to do that, because the contract that she got for the 2020 special, Relatable, that was for 10 million and it was contingent on 2 hours of content, and the original one was only an hour, so she was contractually obligated to do this one. She is 67 though, and everything that I've mentioned, insanely wealthy, the house, everything that she has, I just don't understand why she doesn't fuck off and enjoy her money. But again, they are like addicted to the attention. I just don't believe this is the last that we've heard from her in a Hollywood way. And it's for a plethora of reasons. I mean, even the fact that she's still doing these publicity stunts like exclusives with People about going on vacation with Kris Jenner, doing the vow renewal and posting the entire thing to your 38 million subscribers on YouTube. You don't do that if you are fucking off and enjoying your money. And even the fact that she does still post so much on social media, I mean, she has a private account for her friends and family and things. That's a conscious choice to put that into the public arena. I do think that there's like a very slight possibility that she maybe try some sort of career renaissance in the UK, because I actually read this the other day. There is more studios and things being shot in the UK than in actual Hollywood today. And that is for a plethora of reasons that maybe is a topic for another day, but it's a very interesting topic. Maybe just to me though. But I do not believe this is the last that we've heard from Ellen, especially because she is still doing things behind the scenes, despite the fact that, of course, she does not need the money. She does have 3 upcoming projects that she's an executive producer on. And that's a thing a lot of people in her position do, is they then just stay behind the scenes. But I don't know what her involvement is. It could literally just be like a financing thing or like a vanity kind of credit with the financing. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Of course, I will be keeping my eyes peeled for sure. Let me know all of your thoughts below. James Corden is one of the most disliked people in all of Hollywood. And while some disdain for Corden comes from people believing he's given many roles and opportunities that he doesn't deserve, the vast majority of people detest James Corden because of his rudeness, poor behavior on set, and his arrogance. Over the years, Corden has been caught countless times being openly rude on camera, and there are many infamous stories from the sets of his shows and films that paint a picture of someone who thinks the world revolves around him, and who seems to take pleasure in treating other people poorly, especially the cast and crew he works with. Along with his treatment of cast and crew, Corden has also been exposed for his rudeness towards fans, the general public, and service workers, with an avalanche of stories appearing online year after year about Corden. And on top of all of these stories, what many people don't know is that Corden has been caught in hidden camera moments showing how he really behaves and what he's truly like behind the scenes. So that's what we'll be discussing today. James Corden's behavior behind the scenes and how, despite having it all, he chooses to act in these appalling ways. We'll also go over Corden's career, how he got where he is, and why today it seems as though his horrendous behavior may have truly, finally, caught up with him. James Kimberly Corden was born on August 22nd, 1978 in London, and James Corden was raised in a pretty normal British middle-class family. He was the youngest of 3 children, having 2 older sisters. His father, Malcolm, was a musician in the Royal Air Force Band and also sold Christian books, and his mother, Margaret, was a social worker. He grew up in Hazelmere in Buckinghamshire, and he's spoken about not really having any interest in any subject in school growing up, and that's kind of what made him lean towards acting because he didn't want to really study. With his dad being active in the Salvation Army also, he did play in the Salvation Army band as a kid, and growing up, most people, especially his teachers, described him as loud, attention-seeking, and very confident. While at school, he attended the after-school program called Jackie Palmer Stage School in High Wycombe, and several of his classmates in this program would go on to pretty big success in the entertainment industry, one of the biggest being Eddie Redmayne, who most people will probably know is a very well-known British actor. He won an Oscar for playing Stephen Hawking in The Theory of Everything, and he's probably most recently well-known for playing Newt Scamander in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them series from the Harry Potter universe. A lot of people over the years have spoken about Corden having a lot of jealousy towards other people, especially other British actors and Eddie Redmayne and other actors who go in these kind of prominent leading man roles, as the vast majority of Corden's roles are supporting ones. And if he does have any leading positions, they're generally in voice roles like Peter Rabbit, or he's in a particularly bad movie or show.
James would be like rapping and doing street dance. and I was like, no, but it was genuinely, I was a bit scared of him.
Was he a
little bit.
I'm going to tell you a very, very short but very interesting fact about Eddie Redmayne. As anybody who's frequent on the channel knows, you get these random side tangents sometimes, but it's just one sentence. And Eddie Redmayne, his great-grandfather on his father's side, Sir Richard Redmayne, is actually why we have The Weeknd. He conducted a study with this big retail company in the UK called Boots, which is a big high street brand. There's not really like an equivalent in the US. It's kind of like a nicer version of CVS, and my nana worked there for like 30 years. It was the company that Sir Richard Redmayne did this kind of study with, and they found that when workers got a 48-hour weekend, they worked better and had less absences, and so that's where The Weeknd came from. James Corden had one small role on one episode of a show called The Stinging Roger in 1990, and just as he was turning 18 in 95, he landed his first professional role in the West End in a musical called Mountain Gear. James Corden had only had one line in this kind of ensemble part in this West End play, but from this point on, every part that he got just seemed to feed his ego, and it continued to get bigger and bigger with each role, no matter what type of role, what the reviews were, how big, how small, how good or bad the project was. And he just has always been known as someone who has a very big ego. The following year in 96, he appeared in 8 episodes of Out of Tune, which is like a British TV show. And from 1997 for the next 10 years until 2007, he had a variety of TV appearances on British television. They were quite varying in the size of the roles, whether the TV shows were well known or not, and especially in the late 90s, he had done all sorts of things. He did an interview as a reporter with Meatloaf on the BBC's Good Morning with Annie and Nick. He was in a show called Boys Unlimited, a show called Teachers. He was in a really long-running kind of British soap opera called Hollyoaks. It's more like one of the fringe soap operas. He was on 2 episodes in 99 and 2000. A huge portion of my audience is American and British, and to kind of fill you in on each other's culture, there's nothing more different than an American soap opera and a British soap opera. So what you might picture of James Corden in a British soap opera is very different from an American one. British soaps are on prime time, and especially the biggest ones like Coronation Street and EastEnders. Coronation Street is actually the longest running show. It's been on since the 60s, but the characters are, let's say, much less glamorous in British soaps rather than American. And actually one of my favorite things to do is show my American friends Coronation Street, because they absolutely love it and find it hilarious, because there's so many different British accents and like slang going on, but a lot of the time they cannot understand what's being said.
Pack it in! I said, pack it in! Wipe that grin off your face, or you'll be through that window, teeth first. Get your scrawny backside out.
Another very well-known British touchstone that was going on in 2004 that James Corden was part of was the sketch show Little Britain, which, if you had to explain this type of show, it's very difficult to. There's a lot of British sketch shows. It's probably something similar to Ali G, which I know that was quite big in the US as well, but all of the characters from Little Britain, I don't think would be allowed in 2026. I'm filming this on New Year's Eve, and it's actually almost midnight, so I'll say 2026. From 2004 to 2005, Corden was cast as Jamie Reimer in the show Fat Friends that was again on British TV, and that was a pretty significant role for him that he played for these 5 years. And after he spent all that time on Fat Friends, he spent 2 more years from 2005 to 2007 doing a lot of guest appearances again on TV, but then in 2007, he really got his big break. He ended up writing a TV show called Gavin and Stacey with his writing partner Ruth Jones, and he ended up playing one of the friends of Gavin and Stacey, Smithy, on the show, and Ruth Jones also played their other friend Nessa. Gavin and Stacey were played by Joanna Page and Matthew Horn, and the show was very, very popular in the UK. I'd already moved to the US by the time Gavin and Stacey came out, so I never really got into it. One of my sisters likes it, but by the time I knew what Gavin and Stacey was, I'd already heard about all of the behind the scenes stories with James Corden and how he behaves, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. So I didn't really have any interest in watching the show by that stage. And over the years, the more of him that I've had to endure through certain things that I've watched and he just happens to be in, and the more stories I've heard about him, it's made me want to avoid really anything with him in it. Gavin and Stacey aired 3 seasons from 2007 to 2010, and each of the seasons only had 6 or 7 episodes. It ended up airing the 3rd and final season in January 2010, and they had a Christmas special in 2009, but they have had certain special episodes a couple of years ago that I'll talk about in just a second, but the majority of that show aired from 2007 to 2010. Gavin and Stacey originally aired its first season on BBC 3, which is kind of like a channel for C and D tier shows, but due to its popularity, it was moved over to BBC 1, which is where all of the other seasons and all of the specials ended up airing. As I mentioned, Gavin and Stacey has had Christmas specials over the years. There are a lot of these really, really popular British shows that they have these very small episode counts, but they are so beloved, and they will have every 10 years or something these like one-off Christmas special episodes. They used to do this with a really popular British show called The Royal Family, ROYLE, not like royal like the Queen, and it was super, super popular, and they would have these little revivals as well. I guess kind of like a recent example of this, they haven't done a Christmas special, but is Derry Girls. There's 3 seasons of that, but they are these little episode counts, and I guess that it's not making too many because we can all name countless examples of shows that go on too long and they end up kind of spoiling it. After the 2009 Christmas special for Gavin and Stacey that was part of the 3rd and final season, they didn't have another episode until 2019, 10 years later, and that episode that was a one-off Christmas special was the most viewed non-sporting event in a decade in the UK. Then last December in 2024, or still last December for a few hours, they did have a final Christmas special in December 2024, and that was said to be the actual final last episode ever. And that episode of Gavin and Stacey was the most watched scripted show in 2 decades. And we will get into a few bits of stories that have come out from the set of Gavin and Stacey, because even when James Corden was coming up on his rise, his behavior that he's known for today was happening even back then. During the 3 seasons of Gavin and Stacey from 2007 to 2010, he did start doing a lot more guest spots and hosting things, and he also started doing some movies. In 2009, he did a movie called Lesbian Vampire Killers, and this has horrendous reviews, and it's the one project that he says he regrets the most, and he would not do it given the choice again, which that's really saying something with some of his later work. The actor Matthew Horn, who played Gavin on Gavin and Stacey, and James Corden ended up doing a sketch series together after Gavin and Stacey wrapped, and this show was just called Horn and Corden. They ended up getting horrendous reviews, and the sketch show was cancelled after 6 episodes. The series Horn and Corden was received so badly, along with Lesbian Vampire Killers, which Corden also did with Matthew Horn, his Gavin and Stacey co-star, that it was the end of their kind of working together as a team. They also hosted the Brit Awards around the time they did this sketch show and this movie, and the hosting of the Brit shows was an absolute disaster as well. For 10 years, they didn't do anything, weren't seen together, and then in 2019, they did the first Gavin and Stacey special, and in 2024, they did the last one and the series finale, and they had their characters share a lot less screen time. Lots of outlets were reporting a feud and tensions behind the scenes, and there have been points that Corden has tried to address this, and it just seems like classic, oh no, everything's fine, there's no issue. Because what are they going to say? Oh yeah, we fell out and we hate each other. And probably the biggest time that Corden addressed this was in 2019 when he was interviewed by Piers Morgan for Life Stories. Piers said that he tried to get Matthew Horn to be a part of the show, and he had said that he didn't want to be involved, and he said this to Corden when they were interviewing him, so they got it on camera. Corden is visibly sweating and says, fair enough. But then Matthew Horn came out later and said, Piers Morgan kind of twisted what I said, and they were trying to film the interview to be a part of the show on one day, and he couldn't do that day. And again, to me, this seems like classic spin of trying to justify and make excuses when I'm sure there was another day. And also the way that Corden reacts, saying like fair enough, and the fact that they hadn't even spoke to each other about it. Like if he was doing Piers Morgan Life Stories and they had any sort of relationship together, surely they would have known or even spoken to each other about it, because of course Gavin and Stacey, and Matthew Horn plays Gavin, is going to be a big part of that interview. And so you would think that they would be in some sort of communication about it, but they clearly were not. From 2010 to 2014, Corden was consistently working, but 2014 is when he really crossed into bigger Hollywood projects and when he started showing up in a lot of things. In 2014, he did the movie Into the Woods with Meryl Streep, and there's several other movies that he did from 2015 and 2016. And in 2016, he also started doing a lot of voice work. He was in the Trolls movie. 2017, he did the Emoji movie. And in 2018, he was the voice of Peter Rabbit in the Peter Rabbit movie. Also in 2018, he did the Ocean's 8, which was the female Ocean's movie with Sandra Bullock, Cate Blanchett, Sarah Paulson, and Mindy Kaling. And he also did that horrendous, awful Cats movie that was based on the play, and him as a cat will haunt your dreams. In 2019, he started appearing in a lot of things as himself, one of which was the movie Yesterday, which is a movie about a man who wakes up and the Beatles don't exist. So he records all their records and releases their music, and he appeared as himself in that movie. In 2020, he did the Troll sequel and also the movie The Prom, and there was a lot of backlash about him being cast in The Prom and how he kind of was playing into a lot of gay stereotypes, and also all the discussion around whether he was the person that should have been playing this role. And I feel like so many things he gets cast in now, they're are these discussions, or he hasn't really been cast in a lot of stuff lately, but around this time, 2020, over the next couple of years, there was always some sort of backlash to him really being cast in anything. In 2021, he did the Peter Rabbit sequel and Cinderella, and in 2022, there was a massive slowdown with his work. He really just did the voice work for the Curious George cartoon and 6 episodes of the series Mammals, and in 2023, the only TV movie work was a small guest appearance on The Bold and the Beautiful. In the last few years, really, apart from the Gavin and Stacey Christmas specials in 2019 and 2024 that I mentioned, it has predominantly been voice work. He did also do the Smurfs a couple of years ago and a couple of smaller things, but lately there really hasn't been a lot of projects. Outside of acting work, he has done a ton of hosting. It is honestly shocking the amount of opportunities he's been given acting-wise, hosting-wise, every kind of wise, given that he's so disliked and also that most people don't think that he's really as talented as the amount of opportunities that he gets. He's hosted many award shows, from the Brits to the Tonys to the Grammys and a lot more. And he was even given the job of hosting the Friends reunion special in 2021, which that drove me absolutely nuts when he was attached to that. Of course, the most significant hosting that he's done is when he was given The Late Late Show after Craig Ferguson stepped down in 2015, and he hosted the show through 2023. James Corden did frame his exit from The Late Late Show in 2023 as his choice and that he wanted to step back and move back to the UK, but it was later revealed that the show was losing up to $20 million a year, and that if Corden wanted to continue, he would have had to take a very large pay cut or do another large round of layoffs. And there have already been a lot of layoffs at this stage, and they were still losing all of that money. There have been many stories in the media over the years. People have spoke about this online, and I've also heard behind the scenes that James Corden's Late Late Show was one of, if not the lowest paying shows on television when it came to staff's wages. James Corden at one point advocated for a $5 million raise for himself and at the same time to lower the pay grade for his writers, who were already some of the lowest paid in television. A writer, Jack Allenson, spoke out about this when he heard that Corden was trying to do this, and immediately Corden tried to come and counter him and said that it wasn't just about the 5 million. He was trying to create a new program to give opportunities to entry-level writers, and he just was trying to foster new talent, and not at all to try and reduce the wages below union minimums. But what James Corden said made no sense, because there already was a pipeline and an opportunity on The Late Late Show for entry-level writers. They had internships and they had writers' assistants positions, which are the two ways that shows always foster new entry-level writers. It's also been alleged by several former crew that James Corden is anti-union and that he and his team would change the titles of positions to eliminate union protections. So say you're a boom operator, that's the audio technician who operates the boom mic, which the mic is on the end of a very long pole, and they have to capture all of the dialogue and sound from the actors while keeping the boom and mic out of shot. It's a skilled position, and they're a part of the IATSE Local 695 union, which IATSE is the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. There's all types of different ones, like Grips and Crafty Craft Services are a part of IATSE Local 80. But what James Corden and his team allegedly did to try and pay people very low wages and get around all of the union protections is that they wouldn't call the position a boom operator. They'd make up some random title like mic manager, and this apparently went on throughout the entire run of the show. James Corden has not done many projects over the last couple of years, as I mentioned, and is apparently working on a new show with his co-creator of Gavin and Stacey, Ruth Jones. This is supposed to be on Apple TV in 2027. So we'll have to see if anything comes of that. Hi guys, Editing Ash here. I just am jumping in because I actually didn't forget to include this bit. I just want to kind of reword it a little bit because I did find some additional details and I did just have a few more like thoughts about it. So apologies for like the jumping in, but I want to discuss here like two main things, kind of three actually. The first is James Corden being accused of plagiarism, joke theft. The second is the cruelty that he had hosting a gala, and this is just one example of many times that he's behaved horribly. And the third is how much time, energy, and money he seems to be putting into cleansing his image because he has tried to do a lot of damage control over the last few years. And you can especially see it because the second thing I'm going to talk about, it was very, very, very hard to find clips of. And you can't actually find clips of the whole thing. I will share little bits, but I could only find like little snippets of it basically because not only is he getting a lot of stuff pulled off YouTube, there's also a lot of articles that are 404 not found because he, in my opinion, is trying to do damage control with his image. And you can also see him trying to kind of counter a lot of the things that are out there about him, but he's not doing a very good job of it. So the first is the backlash that he got in 2022 over joke theft with Ricky Gervais. And this was the year before his Late Late Show ended. So Ricky Gervais told this joke about how he didn't like Twitter and a lot of the people on it, and this argument about Twitter being kind of a town square.
That's like going into a town square, seeing a big notice board, and there's a notice, guitar lessons, and you go, but I don't fucking want guitar lessons.
And so James Corden literally told the exact same joke in one of his Late Late Show monologues, and he didn't even have the wherewithal that YouTube plagiarists do, which is change it from guitar lessons to drum lessons at least. Not that that works or should be done. And so when this happened in 2022, that prompted people to do what they always do when someone's accused of plagiarism, which is go through people's back catalog and see if they can find any other examples. And usually there are many more because you don't randomly do this once. And along with a lot of the joke thefts, I mean, you can find so many compilations on YouTube of comedians saying jokes and then James Corden saying the exact same one. James Corden, who was being paid millions and millions and millions, had a professional team of writers, and that show was losing 20 million a year. But I mean, the definition of laziness, I don't know what you want to call it. A lot of the backlash when people combed through all of his old content and monologues and everything and his hosting came from a hosting event that he did in 2017, in October 2017, and the date is very important. He was hosting a gala for AMFAR, which is the AIDS Research Foundation, and the audience for this gala was nearly entirely celebrities. And so this took place on the 13th of October, and for the 2 weeks leading up to that, on the 5th of October was when the bombshell, massive, massive story with Harvey Weinstein first came out in the New York Times. That was published by Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey. And that was the first big mainstream story that set everything into motion with Weinstein. And 5 days after their story was when Ronan Farrow published his piece in The New Yorker, where he had 13 women speak out about Weinstein and the allegations against him that we now know he's been found guilty on a number of those accusations. And that 2 weeks leading up, so the first 2 weeks in October, all of this is happening. There's all of these stories coming out day after day, avalanches of this stuff. And that same weekend that Corden is hosting this gala is when the Me Too movement starts on Twitter the hashtag, first starting out with celebrities and then women all around the world sharing their stories. And that weekend, James Corden goes on stage to a room full of celebrities and not only tells a Harvey Weinstein joke, but when he says the joke, he gets a lot of groans. And as we saw with the Patrick Stewart thing, he does not take any sort of criticism well at all. And he turns into a bully. Like, he even, and I've heard from many, many people, and there's many stories online about him being a bully. And you can even see him in that Patrick Stewart clip, like looks as though he's like physically intimidate him. And so when he gets all of these groans, he then continues on for several minutes saying other Weinstein quote unquote jokes. And it's just the absolute goal that this huge, huge story is happening that's affecting so many different women. And there was also people like Terry Crews speaking out at this time too. And you don't know, there could have been there probably was Weinstein victims in the audience because of the sheer number of women that Weinstein was assaulting and for the decades that he was doing it. And regardless if it wasn't a Hollywood audience, the absolute audacity to go on stage and do that when these women are speaking out about some of the most horrendous, horrendous things, the most unforgivable of crimes, and just one of the most awful things that can happen to someone, and add in the fact that they're speaking out against this extremely powerful, rich, famous man who wouldn't be arrested for another 7 months. And to me, that seems to be a pretty good representation of the type of person James Corden is. I know I've said at several points throughout the video that all I've ever heard about him is he is just a horrendous person and is cruel, mean, a bully. It's not even a secret. It's all there's an absolutely famous Ask Me Anything on Reddit that the amount of stories, there's not one good story in there, and there's so many that it just is very, very hard to believe that at least some of them aren't true. And I also will say that he clearly, over the past few years, in my opinion, is trying to clean up his image because he's done a number of things where he's done like interviews and tried to counter a lot of the things that were out there about him, but that did not go well because there was no justification for a lot of the things that he was doing, like lowering the wages of your staff that are already some of the lowest paid people in television while you want a $5 million raise. When that angle wasn't working anymore, him and his team seemed to instead decide to go the route of, oh, I'm going to hold my hands up and say, that's the old me. I've changed. Oh, I know I used to be an asshole, but that's not me anymore. And also try and delete, pull down whatever they can, like article wise, video wise. Sorry, geez, moving around here. What are you doing? And just all of the stuff together to me looks completely like it is a team of people whose full-time job it is to try and turn this James Corden very, very negative public image around. I know this was a very, very long editing Ash section, so thank you so much for sticking with me and letting me reword some of what I was saying and add in a few little details. But now we'll throw it back to past G and past me. The reason Corden's work may have slowed down is because of his behavior behind the scenes and his reputation in general. As I also mentioned, the public generally has a disdain for him, and he is one of the most disliked celebrities. And outside of Gavin and Stacey, I honestly have never met anyone who has told me they're a legitimate fan of him and his work, which makes his massive success, especially in the US where they didn't even have Gavin and Stacey, so perplexing, especially when you factor in everything we're going to discuss now about his behavior behind the scenes. There have been many, even mainstream stories about Corden and his behavior and just how he treats people. I think one of the first there blatantly was in the mainstream media of him being not the greatest to deal with was in 2016. And a lot of people might not even actually be aware of this because this actually happened on a UK kind of variety show. And again, I'm going to be giving you the specifics of British television, but this show, it's called Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway, and it is kind of a bit like Punk'd in a way. The two hosts, Ant and Dec, they are unbelievably well known in the UK. You would be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't know who they are. They started out on like this teen soap opera called Biker Grove, and then they hosted Saturday morning kid shows, and now they host everything in the UK. Every big reality show, they're the hosts. And everyone knows who they are together, but if you ask people which one is Ant and which one is Dec, a lot of people wouldn't be able to tell you. And so in the UK, Saturday Night TV is quite different from the US. It's a pretty big thing, and Ant and Dec usually have some sort of show on Saturday night, and they had this Saturday Night Takeaway it was running for, honestly, I think close to 20 years, like over, they don't always run it, but it was at one point on over 20 years. And they do this little segment that is a bit like Punk'd with celebrities. Who knows how authentic this actually was, but either way, James Corden does not come off well at all. They had an actor on the gate of the parking lot into the CBS studios where they filmed The Late Late Show. And as Corden is like pulling up, the actor who's the attendant pretends he doesn't know who he is. And of course, you can imagine James Corden didn't like that, and he was like swearing at the attendant and telling him to go and walk around the corner and see his face on the building. They then had him come in, and when he drove up to go into like his parking spot, there was a delivery guy there with like all these packages out, and again that like pissed him off even more. And then when he was in the studio, they had two people that there was like TVs, and then the two girlfriends of the people that were on the TV were at home like doing some sort of interview game, and one of the boyfriends decided to like do a handstand to kind of like show off, and this was all obviously like set up, and the guy's like doing a handstand, and then he like loses his balance and falls into a coffee table, like, you know, in a movie when they're in a fight, and like falls on it and smashes it, and then this bookcase like falls over on top of the guy. I'm probably showing you this on the screen, and they're live on TV, and the guy just had a bookcase fall on him. He's not moving or anything. And Corden is like stifling a laugh. You know, he's supposed to not know this is real, and that's his reaction. And so he is just like, oh, it's gonna be okay. And you can see him like laughing, and they're saying to him, are you okay? Are you okay? And no one's moving. No one's moving. So he didn't come off the greatest with the whole prank, but again, who knows how real that was. Although if it was real, he comes off badly, and if it wasn't real, he still comes off badly, because it's like that's the best you could do when you are knowing it's happening. There are a few other times Corden has been caught out publicly or on camera, the most famous of which is when he and Patrick Stewart got into a full-blown fight on the stage at the Glamour Awards, and no one really comes off great in this situation, but especially James Corden. Patrick Stewart comes up to the mic, and Corden is hosting this awards, and when Patrick Stewart is speaking into the mic, he says that James Corden shouldn't behave the way he's behaving, and he should look like he wants to be there and presenting an award, and not look like he wants to be anywhere else. So
don't stand at the back of the stage with your hands in your pockets, looking around as though you wished you were anywhere but here.
Just get on with it. There we go.
So then James Corden starts going after Patrick Stewart, and it turns into this like embarrassing cringe, like back and forth between them, just fighting basically and hurling insults at each other. And again, this is supposed to be an award show.
From where I was sitting, I can see your belly.
I'm waiting for the punchline. Go on. No, seriously, go on.
Okay.
No, go on. You can see my belly, and we can all see you dying right now. Let's go for it. Here we go.
Poor Zoe Saldana is supposed to be getting an award, and she has to come up and like awkwardly try and smooth over the situation while in the background, Corden and Patrick Stewart are like sniping at each other and getting into a even bigger argument. A lot of celebrities at the level that James Corden is, that he's hosting shows, he's in all of these movies and TV shows. A lot of the bad behavior of stars of that level, generally like their PR and managers and agents, they can keep a lot of that stuff either out of the media or at least sugarcoat it or make the stories not as frequent. And the fact that James Corden has so many stories out there about how bad his behavior is behind the scenes and how rude he is, it just kind of goes to show you how prevalent this must be and how terrible his behavior is, that it is such a repeatable, prominent story. I mean, you look him up, that's all you see really is him being terrible to anyone that he seems to come into contact with. Of course, nowadays it is so much easier for celebs to be caught out because people have the internet, people can easily share their stories, and people also have cameras in their pockets. The last few years, there have been an absolute avalanche of stories coming out about Corden from people who've worked with him behind the scenes, people who've dealt with him in real life, and even people like service workers. One of the biggest stories with him and staff was when a restaurant owner spoke out about Corden's vile behavior. The owner of a New York restaurant called Balthazar's wrote an Instagram post about Corden and banned him from his restaurant over Corden's behavior. The Instagram post from the restaurant owner read, "James Corden is a hugely gifted comedian, but a tiny cretin of a man, and the most abusive customer to my Balthazar's servers since the restaurant opened 25 years ago. I don't often 86 a customer, but today I 86 Corden." And the restaurant owner gave two examples of Corden's behavior at the restaurant, one of which was James Corden was at Balthazar's with his wife on October 9th for brunch. He asked for a table outside, and the brunch maitre d', Ali Walters, took the party to table 301. Mr. Corden's wife ordered an egg yolk omelette with Gruyere cheese and salad. A few minutes after they received the food, James called the server MK and told them there was a little bit of egg white mixed with the egg yolk. MK informed the floor manager, and the kitchen remade this dish, but unfortunately sent it with home fries instead of salad. That's when Corden began yelling like crazy to the server, "You can't do your job, you can't do your job. Maybe I should go into the kitchen and cook the omelet myself." The manager then brought over another dish and even gave them complimentary champagne to kind of smooth things over. And Corden was nice to the manager who brought them this stuff, but then continued to be very nasty to the server. The server was shaken but professional and continued to finish her shift. When this story was made public by the restaurant owner, it started getting big coverage in the media, and Corden and his team went into major damage control, and they even addressed it on Corden's Late Late Show. He did a ton of interviews and articles and social media posts and went on about how sorry he was and how he acted kind of out of character and it wasn't something ordinary for him, and that was the old him. He called the owner and also addressed it on social media that he'd apologized to the owner. He ended up saying in an interview with The Guardian, "I also hate, as I said to the owner that day, that I've ever upset anybody ever. It was never my intention. It just wasn't. I love that restaurant. I love the staff there. I hope I'm allowed in again one day so that when I'm back in New York, I can go there and apologize in person, which is something I will absolutely do." This story just happened to be one where the owner spoke out and got traction on social media. But this story is par for the course with everything I've ever heard about James Corden behind the scenes and everything you'll read about him ever. And of course, you can't believe everything on the internet, but there is such a flood of these stories that it would really be something if at least some of them weren't true. Allegedly, Corden's bad behavior even dates all the way back to Gavin and Stacey, even some people say before that. There have been many allegations about James Corden not only being exceptionally rude to everyone he was working on set with, having frequent shouting matches and tantrums, but there's also been allegedly a lot of disruptions due to his drinking and substance use. And there have been multiple people who worked on the 2000 seasons of Gavin and Stacey saying it wasn't infrequent for him to come to set completely intoxicated and with visible signs of substance ingestion. I've heard from multiple people that James Corden makes every set he's on filled with tension and either completely ignores anyone he deems beneath him, or he's outright foul to people, shouting at them, calling them names, and making everyone just feel miserable. It isn't completely unheard of for big-headed actors to act this way, to be rude to PAs and crew members on set, but James Corden even allegedly treats other casts and writers and just basically everyone this way. I wouldn't be surprised if this is why a lot of his work has slowed down. To be honest, yes, he has ridiculous money, and it could absolutely be something of his choosing that he's not doing so many projects, but I do find people are getting less tolerant of appalling behavior by actors, especially if they don't have that massive, massive A-list name and they don't have the talent to back it up. Obviously, no one should be allowed to treat people that way, but there are a lot of people who get away with it because they are so huge. Not saying it doesn't still happen with so many people, but basically if you're Brad Pitt, who does allegedly behave horrendously, you can get away with this sort of behavior because you are such a star. It does seem as though a lot of older, big male Hollywood leads are more likely to get away with this sort of thing, although absolutely this not only people with big names that can get away with it, but people that have very, very good PR teams. Jessica Chastain. We'll save that for another video. I think James Corden's behavior is so consistently bad that so many stories have spilled out about him. Of course, as I said, you can't believe everything you read online, but there are literally thousands of stories online about Corden's behavior. On Reddit, there are so many threads on so many different forums of people, not only in the industry, but people just encountering him in real life, other waiters and bartenders, PAs, any sort of, flight attendants, everyone. There's even stories of people observing his poor alleged treatment of his wife. I think one of the clips that absolutely sums up James Corden in every way is a clip from his Late Late Show where he's playing a game with Jimmy Kimmel. It's a game where a person is asked a question, and if they can't or won't answer, they have to eat or drink from a concoction of different foods and smoothies. It's called Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts. And James Corden is asked by Jimmy Kimmel to name two of his camera people, and he can't name one. You're filming a show 5 times a week, every week out of the year. Okay, some weeks they film more so they can have Christmas off and stuff, but you cannot name a single camera person. To me, that just says everything about him, especially because not only is he not able to name either of them, and he doesn't seem embarrassed by that at all, he then kind of goes on to just make a joke out of it. That is embarrassing that you don't even have the decency to learn the people's names that you're working so closely with for years. And generally, in my opinion, I think that that is something that really can define whether an actor is someone that's very difficult and rude to deal with, or generally someone that is nice and most people like working with, is if they can walk on set and they know most of the crew's name, especially on TV shows where it's constantly someone you're working with a lot of the year, and then 4 years. It's not a movie where you're shooting it for 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. And I know that's something like so simple and basic. I'm sure most people going into their job would know most people's names, especially people that are working with face to face every day. But it's honestly not unheard of that there's a lot of James Cordens walking around. This was a bit of a shorter video because, one, I cannot talk about James Corden for too long, but I wanted to talk about what a knob he is because I have heard so many stories over the years about, and not even like anything particular, just what I've been saying, that he is just so rude and just fosters this awful environment on set. And I honestly have never, ever had anyone say a good word about him. And as I mentioned, I cannot for the life of me understand how he got where he got, not because of just his behavior, but I just do not find him talented at all. I think that he's also a terrible host, but that's just my opinion. If you made it to the end of this video, leave MVP below so I can thank you for watching. And link down below is also Miss G's new merch. Also down there is my Patreon, my social media, G's social media, and the sources. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and G and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.